Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Thanks to those of you watching the live stream and to those of you who will watch the video of this morning's session later on. I'm Michael Strain, Director of Economic Policy Studies here at AEI. On behalf of AEI's scholars and leadership, I'm honored and so pleased to welcome Kevin Brady here today. Chairman Brady needs no introduction. He is chairman of the House Committee on Ways and Means. He previously served as chairman of the Joint Economic Committee. Until 2013, Chairman Brady was the leader of the Trade Subcommittee and helped lead efforts to pass new sales agreements with Panama, South Korea, and Colombia. The topic at the front of many minds in Washington this week is tax reform, and Chairman Brady is one of the key people working to make reform a reality. AEI is very grateful to him for taking the time to be with us today and to explain the hard work he and his colleagues are doing up on Capitol Hill. Chairman Brady will take the podium in a moment and present some remarks. He will then be joined in conversation with my AEI colleague, Alex Brill. He will take some questions from the audience as well. Mr. Brill is a resident fellow at AEI, where he studies the impact of tax policy on the U.S. economy and the fiscal, economic, and political consequences of tax and budget policy, among other topics. Mr. Brill is the author of a pro-growth proposal to reduce the corporate tax rate to 25%, and is the co-author with AEI's Alan Viard of The Real Tax Burden, More Than Dollars and Cents. He has testified numerous times before Congress. Before joining AEI, he was the policy director and chief economist of the House Ways and Means Committee. With that, I'll turn the podium over to Chairman Brady. Mr. Chairman.
Michael, thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you all for having me here this morning, and love the new headquarters for AEI. We look forward to working with Alex as well. Appreciate having a Ways and Means leader and professional staff helping lead the discussion on tax reform as well. And of course, I cannot come to AEI without thanking Arthur Brooks for his leadership in so many ways. It is a pleasure to be here at AEI, surrounded by some of the brightest and most insightful conservative leaders in the country. So before I get started today, I want to say how thankful I am for all the work that you've done and continue to do in support of fundamental pro-growth, transformational tax reform. This week is a particularly exciting week to be discussing the challenges and opportunities of tax reform here at AEI. Just before Thanksgiving break, the House passed transformational tax reform for the first time in more than 3 decades. Now, this week, the Senate is moving full steam ahead to do the same. It is their time to stand and deliver for the American people. We're looking forward to finding common ground in conference committee, finalizing the details, and sending this historic legislation to the President by the end of this year. If anyone understands the magnitude of this moment and what it means for our country, it's all of you in this room who've worked for years to help us develop and deliver a new American tax system that is simple, fair, efficient, and vaults America back into the lead worldwide. And through tax reform, we have an incredible opportunity to promote the kind of lasting economic growth that can only come from enhancing free enterprise, increasing individual liberty, and expanding economic freedom. And without tax reform, if the status quo in Washington prevails, there are real consequences, and we'll only continue to see erosion of these essential pillars of our economy. Think about it. Free enterprise can't blossom and increase opportunity with the tax code that props up special interests at the expense of hardworking families, entrepreneurs, and Main Street innovators. Individual liberty can't grow with the tax code that forces Americans to spend billions of hours and dollars on filing their taxes each year. That's time and money they can otherwise devote to pursuing their own personal and professional aspirations. And when it comes to promoting and protecting economic freedom, that freedom to take an innovative idea and turn it into a breakthrough product or service that changes lives, today's tax code just fails miserably. To have real economic freedom, we need a tax code that supports free enterprise and strengthens individual liberty. A tax code that doesn't reward you for behavior A, B, and C, and punish you for behavior D, E, and F. We need a tax code that rewards hard work and directs investment to where it can create the most opportunity for the most people. And with today's tax code, companies are too often encouraged to invest where they can get a new and better tax break instead of where they can create a new and better job. All of today's wasteful exclusions, exemptions, carve-outs, and deductions have a powerful way of distorting decision-making and diverting investment away from where it can do the most good for the American people. It's almost like the game Plinko on The Price is Right. Now, you don't have to admit you've watched The Price is Right. You know, as a child, most of us got this under our holiday trees. The one where you put the coin in and it bounces around and eventually ends up somewhere. Today, when you run investment through today's tax code, it bounces from one tax incentive to another, zigzagging through a maze of distortionary provisions until it lands in a completely different place. With tax reform, we're focused on removing those counterproductive provisions, removing the distortionary pegs and prongs of today's Plinko tax code. This means simplifying and streamlining the code, means providing certainty and predictability, and it means leveling the playing field, provide greater fairness to all taxpayers at much lower tax rates. In the end, that kind of true pro-growth tax reform will allow capital investment to flow more freely and efficiently throughout our economy. And with the House-passed Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, I think we've delivered a system that will encourage and reward capital investment very well. This bill rewards investment in three kinds of capital that I believe are essential to the growth of jobs, paychecks, and our economy as a whole. The first is physical capital. The second is human capital. The third is social or community capital. When it comes to physical capital, which provides both the literal and figurative building blocks for our economy, we're delivering the lowest rates in modern history for American businesses of all sizes. We're also moving the United States to a modern international tax system that doesn't trap business investment overseas. This means businesses will be able to keep more of what they earn, no matter where they earn it, and use that money to invest in growing operations and jobs here at home. In fact, the CEO of AT&T, Randall Stephenson, said last month that if the House's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is signed into law, their company will increase investment significantly in America by $1 billion in the first year alone. And he's not alone. I hear this from job creators large and small throughout the country. And along with the historic 20% corporate rate for our larger businesses, we're also providing historic tax relief for America's pass-through businesses, no matter if they're just starting up or if they're established in a growing firm. This includes providing for the very first time a rate of just 9% for pass-through businesses earning less than $75,000 in annual income. That's a brand new source of support to help new businesses keep and reinvest more of their earnings in those crucial make or break early years. To have an economy that's healthy and growing in the 21st century, Jim, we need our 21st century startups and small businesses to succeed, grow, and create well-paying jobs. This brings me to the second type of capital, human capital. Here, we're taking action with policies that are specifically designed to increase investment, to increase productivity, and increase paychecks for American workers. One provision I'm particularly excited about is full expensing. For the first time, businesses of all sizes and all types will be able to immediately deduct purchases of equipment that improve operation and enhances the skills of their workers. These are new tools Americans can use to help them do their jobs more efficiently and more effectively. Not only does higher productivity lead to higher wages, that's good for everybody, it also increases our standard of living here in America. And it allows our workforce to learn and incorporate new techniques and new technologies that make our entire economy more dynamic, versatile, and prosperous. That's why just yesterday, a group of 9 prominent economists were featured in the Wall Street Journal saying that this provision, full expensing, will contribute to 3% or higher GDP over the next decade here in America. Finally, our historic tax reform legislation will encourage and reward investment in social or community capital. as I mentioned before. I call it that because strong American communities and strong American families have long been some of the most important secret weapons of our economy. Our communities are the glue that hold our local economies together. And it's much more than Main Street storefronts and local manufacturing plants, as important as they are. It's all the churches and the houses of worship, the community organizations, the Rotary and civics clubs, the youth sports leagues, you name it. However you define it for yourself, our sense of community in America gives us belonging, pride, and purpose in our life. And as history has shown, when America's communities are strong, our economy is strong. So with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we're going to drive more investment in that social and community capital. We do this by doubling the standard deduction so Americans can keep more of every paycheck to save or spend on their family's needs without having to rely on a maze of confusing deductions. We lower tax rates for Americans of all walks of life, and we eliminate the marriage penalty in nearly every tax bracket. We preserve the earned income tax credit so we can continue to encourage and reward work. Finally, with this bill, we protect and improve tax benefits that help Americans with some of the most important investments in their lives. This includes creating a new family tax credit that increases the child tax credit significantly so families can better afford the cost of raising children and caring for loved ones. We're also preserving the mortgage interest deduction, streamlining higher education tax benefits, and protecting the charitable deduction. Hardworking families will have support as they buy a home, send their kids to college, and give back to the local cause or charity they believe in. And we know from history, nothing drives charitable giving like a strong and growing economy. With the 21st century tax code that drives investment in physical capital, in human capital, and this important social capital, Americans nationwide will see more jobs, fairer taxes, and bigger paychecks. More than that, they'll have a better chance to realize their own American dream, whatever it may be. Now, by passing the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in the House, we took a major step toward this type of pro-growth, pro-family tax code, making that a reality for the American people. But this is not our last step by any means. We're excited for the Senate's work this week. We're eager to come together with them in a conference committee and with President Trump in the weeks ahead to deliver fundamental tax reform for the first time in more than 3 decades. We're also committed to improving this legislation at every step along the way. There's no such thing as a perfect tax code, but there are proven ways to strengthen our communities and grow our economy. And I believe this approach, this tax reform bill, will go a long way in making our communities and our economies stronger than ever before. Thank you again for having me, and I look forward to being grilled unmercifully by Alex Brill in the moments ahead. Thank you. We'll grab a second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks
Thanks for coming to AEI. I know you're busy. This is a busy time for you, and we appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us and with those who are watching on our live stream today. I want to start with a topic that you didn't address. You covered a lot of ground in your opening remarks, but you didn't talk about the budget. The budget process that you're working through allows for a tax cut of $1.5 trillion over the coming decade. This is not a revenue neutral exercise. This is both tax reform and a net tax reduction. I'm struck by that number because $1.5 trillion is the cost of the corporate tax provision that's in the bill. It's also the amount of revenue that would have been raised by a provision that we don't talk about anymore, the border adjustment tax. What's so special about that number? Why is that the budget number? And are you concerned or pleased that we have that as the overall fiscal impact?
Look, I think tax reform done right can move us toward a balanced budget in a major way. I think economic growth gets its most of the way there. I think it's easy to foresee 4% growth, 0.4% growth a year or more. I believe it will go beyond that, but that alone won't do it. to be truly revenue neutral, you also have to eliminate hundreds of special provisions in the tax code to be able to lower those rates, eliminate those distortions, and really grow the economy in a significant way. So, Alex, I think it's a combination of growth from real tax reform, and we know this from the Kennedy cuts and the Reagan cuts, what that can do. But it's also essential that we eliminate a lot of those special carve-outs, exemptions, to get back to that balanced budget. I'll finish with this. I think the way to ensure continued high deficits and national debt is do nothing. Stick with this slow growth economy up until the recent months. Stick with the tax code that our global competitors have just left us in the dust with. Just stay the way things are. I guarantee you deficits will continue. With tax reform done right, I think we change that.
What if you're wrong? Economists disagree, right? I mean, a lot of economists are saying that the economy can accelerate for some period of time to a new higher level if tax reform's done right. But we don't know. We have limited experiences from the past. What if it materializes to a lower degree? If it doesn't grow as you want, what will Congress do if we can't improve the situation?
So here's what I know. If we want to continue with this slow growth, where paychecks have been stagnant for more than a decade, where job opportunities are fewer, and where we continue to see our U.S. companies continue to move not just their headquarters, their research, their manufacturing, patents overseas, just stick with the status quo. We already know, coupled with high regulations and higher taxes, what that gets us, which isn't much. It really is time for a new direction. And tax reform after 30 decades, I don't know who can defend the status quo, who believes this won't create strong economic growth. And at the end of the day, I'm confident this is going to recoup those revenues in a significant way.
Do you think we'll see, as this process moves forward to a conference agreement, final votes, do you think we'll see the Joint Tax Committee produce a dynamic analysis of the bill?
Well, I know they're hard at work at that on the House side as well. I don't know the timing for that. I think ultimately they will produce that. But know, too, the way the Senate's budget process worked, they decided not to sort of take the current policy baseline and the dynamic scoring numbers, but rather just choose one number, $1.5 trillion, to write to, which we've not only done that, but by eliminating those other provisions, we've been able to provide even more tax relief beyond that.
You talked about eliminating other provisions, and you talked about that in your remarks. It's something that, quite frankly, is not a big part of the messaging. The messaging is often more about tax relief, but what you're talking about is in reality, the winners and losers of tax reform, right? Some of the breaks have to go away, which means that some people might pay more. Is that right?
Well, at the end of the day, you can't lower the rates and become dramatically simpler and fair and keep everything we have. Not that everything has to go, but everything can't stay either. Right. And so in many of these provisions, Alex, as you know from your Ways and Means Committee, they're in there today because our tax code is so horrible. Those rates are so high. It really drives you to special interest provisions because we can't compete, or it's unfair. So by lowering the rates dramatically, we're able to simplify. A number of those provisions aren't as essential as they are. And of course, at the end of the day, you've got to make these really tough trade-offs in tax reform. It's the reason it isn't done but once every 3 decades. This is hard work.
This process started, it's not a new idea.
Yeah,
We've been talking about this idea for a long time, but it really kicked into high gear about 1.5 years ago with something called the Better Way Plan, right? Something that you authored along with the Speaker Ryan. The Ways and Means Committee put down the first mark of what tax reform is going to look like. Where we are today is not exactly where you started 1.5 years ago. In particular, the provision I mentioned, the border adjustment tax, is gone. Do you wish it was there? Do you understand why it's gone? Are you angry? Do you miss it? I'll be honest. I miss the Better Way Plan a little bit.
Look, I think we went very bold, as you know, working in the House. We decided, look, you only get one shot every 30 years. Change this tax code. So let's not tweak a few things, call it a day. That wouldn't work. So we went very bold, and I will tell you, I think we've still gone very bold. We propose that as we think, a very modern, simple way to level the playing field, both for American companies here and competing abroad as well. But at the end of the day, there were too much uncertainty. We set it aside for future study. We've moved on from that, but still at the end of the day, the lowest rates in modern history for businesses of all sizes, a redesign of the tax code so our companies can compete and win anywhere in the world, including here at home. A dramatically simpler tax code. I've got the postcard in my folder right there. One where imagine a code so fair and simple. We all know what each other's deductions are because we have exactly the same ones, and we can name them. There's a fairness to that. There's a simplicity of that Americans have never seen before. So I would argue, while we've made adjustments and changes since the Better Way, we are still as bold, and I think especially in the simplicity side, still as fair.
It strikes me, I've said for a long time that tax reform is going to require presidential leadership. Republicans have been asking for tax reform for a number of years, and I've thought, I think it's pretty conventional wisdom, that because of the winners and losers aspect, that it requires presidential leadership. But is that true? I mean, are we following that pattern? I mean, in a sense, it seems that the Better Way plan, that this is actually maybe a process that's being led by Congress more than by the executive branch.
I think everyone's played their role in a very positive way, and I say that because I don't think the House and Senate bills, which while people tend to stress the differences, and there are some, there is an awful lot of common ground as well. We would not have that but for the White House and President Trump himself engaging with the House and Senate to that, what we call a unified framework, but basically one tax reform approach, not three, not five, one. But for that leadership from the president, I don't think we'd be in this position right now with the House and Senate riding toward the same target, somewhat differently, but not dramatically differently. And so I would say, when the president's out there on the stump talking about tax reform, you can tell. People focus, people listen, it matters. So yes, it does require presidential leadership. We're getting it, but it takes leadership from the House and Senate. We're getting that too.
To date, it's been a completely partisan effort. No Democrats in the House have engaged, and to my knowledge, no Democrats in the Senate have engaged as well. Is that going to be the way all the way through the process? Is there a chance that more senators come on board, that Democrats come on board?
Yeah, I wish they would. Because Democrats are seeing the same thing in their communities we're seeing in our communities, which is a lot of young people coming out of school can't find jobs that pay worth a darn. They're seeing their companies move overseas as well. They're seeing a lot of people leave the workforce and never come back. Democrats have as big a stake, if not bigger, stake than we do in getting this done. And they bring great ideas to the table. In the House, we've spent the last year meeting with and listening to our Democrat colleagues who talk about middle-class tax cuts, fairness for small businesses, getting our jobs back from overseas. So I think there is common ground at the end of the day. I'm still hopeful that there's some JFK Democrats, who he embraced top to bottom tax cuts, an increase in economy that raised all boats going forward. I still think there's room for Democrats to engage if they want.
So the door is open. You're listening to their ideas.
Absolutely.
You'll make adjustments for them if they're willing to be.
Look, I think they could play a critical role in this.
Who's going to chair the conference committee?
So we'll leave that to the process to continue.
Fair enough.
Yeah, we'll leave that.
I was home for Thanksgiving, and someone asked me what's happening with tax reform, and I didn't want to spend too much time on it, so I just said that there are basically two things that are happening. I said that the corporate tax rate's coming way down, and the standard deduction is doubling. Yeah. I think that those are the two provisions that are sort of at the root of so much of what's happening. The code's getting simpler because the standard deduction gets so much larger, and we're getting competitive because the corporate rate comes down.
Yeah.
You touched on this before, but why not just do that? I mean, there's so much challenge, political challenge, in pulling out all the other provisions of the code. There's so much disruption and distortion. There's so many people that are getting upset by the other 110 provisions in the code. Yeah. Why not just cut the rate, double the standard deduction, and we could have been done already?
Yeah, because it wouldn't get the job done. And here's why. So we're driving, compared to our global competitors, we're driving an old clunker of a tax car around. And there's no doubt, having lower rates, simplifying somewhat on the family side would help. But it's like putting supercharged fuel in an old clunker of a car. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll go faster for a while. It just can't keep up with the newer models on the road. And we know what China, Europe, Mexico can't. We know what they're driving, and they're leaving us in the dust. And so we had to redesign a new car for America that can help us compete and win throughout the 21st century. It's just necessary to do that. So we are taking on the whole tax code. And if you noticed in the House, we used 429 pages of reform to transform this tax code. The Senate is seeking to do the same, because at the end of the day, we couldn't take, in my view, the simpler, easier route and really create a code that Americans deserve, I think, going forward.
I got one last question.
Does it involve border adjustment? We off that one yet?
It doesn't. We'll go.
Okay. My gosh, man.
But it's on that side of the ledger. What's your favorite revenue raiser in the bill?
Oh, man. Look, I'll show you what my overall favorite part of this is. It's the postcard. It's the simplicity for families and individuals that they've only dreamed about. And the reason we talk about this a lot is because the code today, people, it's a mess. It's just a monstrosity. People know that. And they just believe there's all these special provisions for some and headaches for themselves. And they're right. And so moving toward a simpler system, even if we add more onto the postcard, that isn't a problem. That's America's tax code. In fact, in the House, one thing I've told all our colleagues is, look, we've stripped this code down to the essentials, and we're rebuilding it based on what people need in the 21st century, not in the 1980s or in some case the 1950s where these provisions, or earlier. And so we're asking people, what's important to you today on that postcard? And we're learning as we go through the process what to add back, what can stay out. At the end of the day, I think we're going to see a dramatically simpler but more pro-growth tax code. And we deserve it. Americans, they really deserve something better.
I agree. I think we do. I appreciate all the effort that you're putting into this
Thanks,
process.
Al.
This is
Thanks
very
for your
challenging.
leadership, too. You've been a great thinker on these issues as AEI has, so thanks.
Well, thank you. We're going to open it up to the audience, take a few additional questions, and we'll see how that goes. So there are microphones that are coming around. When the mic comes to you, please state your name and please ask a question. Don't give a speech. My colleague right here in the front.
Promises.
Mr. Chairman Martise, I'm a resident fellow here at AEI.
Yeah, hey, Mark.
So when George W. Bush was campaigning for his tax relief plan in 2001, he said at every campaign stop, every American who pays taxes will get a tax cut. And that's not true of this plan. The Joint Committee on Taxation says 9% of Americans will see a tax increase, including a lot of middle-class Americans. The Tax Policy Center said in 2019, 1 in 10 middle-class Americans will see an average tax cut of a tax increase of $1,000. In 2025, 14% will see a tax increase of $1,170. Should Republicans be raising taxes on anyone, and much less on the middle class?
So I dispute those analyses. As Joint Committee on Taxation said, Americans of all income levels will see a tax decrease. The Tax Policy Center, like others, describe an America that doesn't exist. An America where the economy never grows and paychecks never increase, an America never competes and wins worldwide. That's why I believe their analysis is flawed. What we're proposing is our tax rates at every income level, dramatic tax cuts for businesses of all size, wherever they're located. And I would say at the end of the day, wait till the final bill. So at every step, we've worked to improve this, especially for high earners and high income tax states, for example. That's been a major challenge. We're proposing a dramatically simpler and fairer approach. So at the end of the day, I'm convinced we can help Americans keep more of what they earn at every income level, regardless of where they live. Then there's the paychecks issue. Don't let that be lost in this discussion. If we were keeping paychecks stagnant as they've been for the last decade or more, that's one thing. But with the growth, especially on the rate cuts and designs for our local businesses and others, you're going to see increases in paychecks. That matters too for families as well. So there is more than just the rates in this tax reform. It's designs, it's the paychecks, It's the getting rid of the distortions that I think hurt most American families.
Okay, another question in the back. Yes, sir.
Hello, Aaron Siegel. I work at a state government affairs firm across the river in Arlington. Thank you so much for being here, Chairman Brady.
Yes.
I just have a question about the individual mandate. I know at the beginning it was reported that you might think that you think it might complicate the process. I just wonder what you think if it's in the final version of the bill.
Well, I think the House has repeatedly repealed the individual mandate because it is forcing Americans. It is a tax to force Americans to buy health care whether they want or can use it. And so we're going to let the Senate process move forward, work on it in conference committee. There is, though, a synergy here in the sense that removing the law that forces Americans to buy health care they don't want and can't afford is giving them the freedom to not have to buy that expensive health care. Tax reform is also about the freedom to use your money the way you choose, not the way Washington wants you to use it. And so there is a relationship, I think, between the two. And often, I know in my district, the families who come up to me and say, please get rid of this mandate, it's costing us money, and we can't afford Obamacare itself. It really is hitting in those modest and middle income families that we want to help in tax reform. So, we're going to let the process go forward, encourage the Senate to deliver a good pro-growth product. We'll take it up in committee, but I know the House has always been strongly supportive of eliminating that forced tax on Americans.
Okay. Mandates a tax. In the back.
Hi, Timothy Lee, Center for Individual Freedom. We're releasing a coalition letter today that runs a broad array of conservative and libertarian organizations, everybody from NRA to Americans for Tax Reform, and it relates to an issue with the IRS, and that is ending abuse and eliminating the Schedule B for 501c organizations, which, as you know, has created abuse in the past. This legislation passed the House last year, and Senator Tim Scott introduced it in the Senate. And so we don't believe that it requires going through the committee process again, et cetera, et cetera. And so kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that, given the fact that it is already passed and we now have a president who will sign it, and it garners unanimity within the conservative and libertarian movement. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Well, a couple maybe on a broader view. As you know, we do make changes within the House bill to get Washington out of, frankly, interfering with many of our nonprofit organizations. We focused initially on religious freedom because we really think we've seen over the last number of years an IRS who targets individuals and organizations based on their political belief, whether they're pro-Israel, pro-life, pro-constitution, or otherwise. And the Johnson Amendment, for example, has, I think, increased the ability for abuse from the IRS. I want them out of those lives and out of those organizations. And so we address that in the House bill as well. I don't know where the Senate is on the Schedule B issue, but look, at the end of the day, whether you're an organization, whether you're an individual or you're a business, we want the IRS more out of your life. The tax code can help us do that by leaving less of the complication and interpretation behind, making this simpler and more straightforward. I think we remove the IRS and its intrusiveness. I think those issues are really critical. So, thank you.
Another question. Yeah, right here in the front.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here, Chairman. My name is Will Estes, and I'm a fellow with the American Medical Association. I'm also a medical student, and I have a lot of friends who are MD PhDs. They're doing a dual degree, and some of them are concerned about the elimination of the tuition waiver exemption, and that's something that isn't on the Senate side. And I'm just curious, kind of, what do you think is the message that I can take back to them about how this sort of fits into the broader picture? And is this something that you think there may be some flexibility on when it gets to conference?
I think there may be, but here 2 points for you to take back. One, outside of the university world, there is some controversy to the current tax provisions because it says, remember I talked about the IRS, Washington rewards you for behavior A, B, and C, and punishes you for other. So today, if you're a grad student in a degree, America's hoping you'll pursue, and you get tuition assistance from the university, it's tax-free. But if you're that same student pursuing that same degree, but you're working across the street at a company trying to earn the money for that tuition and working hard, well, you're taxed for every dime of it. So in the past, there's been the question of, wait a minute, is that fair? Same type of people pursuing the same great degrees, working equally hard, one tax-free, one not. Nonetheless, as we've really gone down to the bones of the tax code and rebuilding it, we're listening. And so we're hearing from lawmakers that this provision at the university level is an important one. And so as we go forward, and I've heard this from a number of my colleagues on the House floor as well, so as we move forward with the Senate in a conference committee, we're going to address issues like that. And we've already been listening very carefully as we, again, really took the tax code back to the basics and rebuild it. Issues like the adoption tax credit, really important, to families, to pro-life groups. I'm an adoptive dad myself. We saw quickly how important that is in a tax code. Same with businesses that help their workers with child care, restored that as well. So as the process goes forward, we're going to be listening to those concerns and issues and incorporating them in the final bill.
You talked a lot about social capital, talked a lot about nonprofits in the previous question. In your remarks, you talked about charitable giving, keeping the deduction. What's your sense of the impact that this bill overall might have on giving itself? Not the other aspects of the nonprofit social capital world, but more people will be taking the standard deduction, fewer people will be itemizing, the provision still exists. Maybe that deduction encourages giving. Are you concerned about the overall level of giving?
I'm not. In fact, I think it'll increase. Here's why. One, today, as you know, the charitable deduction is only used by those who itemize. So a lot of families who are giving at church each week or giving to that, the school, because their kids are there, that don't itemize get zero. There's zero incentives. So doubling standard deduction allows them to use their money the way they see fit. More of it, including for those type of charitable giving. Secondly, what's little reported is that we actually increase the amount that people can give through charitable deductions. Today it's limited to 50% of your income. We increase it to 60%. But we know this, at the end of the day, track the last half century. Track charitable giving. There's one thing that drives it, a stronger economy. When the economy's pumping, charitable giving dramatically increases. When it goes down, we see the exact same effect as well. And so I'm convinced at the end of the day, with stronger economy, keeping the charitable deduction in place, in fact, increasing the ability to use it more, and having the types of paychecks where people can give more at home and in the community, I think that drives more charitable giving.
That's good. Other questions from the audience? Any diversity in the desire to ask questions? Yes, sir, right here in the middle.
Thank you very much, Larry Checco. Given the CBO's analysis of this bill, it seems, and I think I'm substantiating a bit what Mark was trying to say, it looks a lot like trickle down to me. And I think that trickle down has had about 40 years to prove itself. And the only thing that's trickled down to most Americans is misery. What is going to change in this bill? Corporations right now many are flush with cash, but incomes aren't going up. And why is this bill going to be any different? Thank you.
Speaking of misery, let's just stick with the same blue economy we've had for the past decade or more, where young people cannot find, I was at Bed Bath & Beyond, not for me, my wife sent me. And so the other day, the cashier was muttering, "This is not why I went to college." The cashier. A lot of young people cannot find the jobs that they hope to when they get out of school. We continue to see our jobs march overseas, and paychecks for middle-class families have been flat for more than a decade. So you want to keep that type of misery for families? Change nothing. Keep the tax code just the way it is. Let's go with this sub 2% growth for America for the next decade. And that's what all the economists believe without change will occur. That ensures a new generation has much fewer opportunities than you and I have had. it is time for a change. In our tax code, I don't know who can defend the current status quo. I don't know why you would, especially since our global competitors, again, they have taken a page from our playbook, lowered the rates, redesigned the tax code, become so much more competitive. That's where our opportunities are going. And so it is a time to reverse all of that with the dramatically new, fair, simpler tax code. And so I will tell you, I think this is growth that begins on Main Street, begins with workers and paychecks, and grows from there, because our companies can be able to compete and win anywhere in the world, including here. So look, it's time to dump the status quo, all the special interest provisions that help some and hurt so many others. It's time to do away with those. Simplify this code, create a fairness and a pro-growth part that we haven't seen in far too long.
You talked about the global competitiveness part. That your jurisdiction obviously includes the trade world.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of ambassadors and foreign leaders in your job. What's their sense of U.S. tax reform? Are they nervous? Are they worried that we're going to beat them? Or are they looking forward to a more prosperous U.S. economy?
Well, I think they've been stunned it took us so long. You know, they've had a clear field for 30 years and have worked it beautifully. And they're not stopping. So we have gone from the lead pack. We now, among our 35 top competitors, we're ranked 31st, correct, in competitiveness, and we're still falling. We're still falling behind because our competitors are serious about this. So us leapfrogging back in the top 3 to 5 worldwide, keeping us there, obviously is a bit of a game changer. But I don't see our competitors stopping. You know, this is a competitive game. Worldwide. If we want the jobs and opportunity to research, the innovation occur here, we have to be able to compete. So after we finish this tax reform, I don't see that as completing our work. We're going to continue to do tax reform where it makes us more competitive. So
this is not the last bill.
It is not.
There'll be a bill next year?
I'm not saying next year, but I'm going to have to recover from this one. But I'll tell you what, this is not the last step. We've got to work to do in retirement areas, in tax reform. We look at different sectors like financial products and services, see opportunities for clear, more efficient tax reform. There are a number of areas that we want to continue to improve in.
And what about outside the tax code? What else does the committee have on its horizon once this task is complete?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Trade obviously is a key part of it, because if we want to get the kind of growth America deserves, you know, you've got to get the tax code right. You've got to get regulation rebalanced. We're seeing more of that now under President Trump. You got to get trade right.
That means more free trade.
More free trade. The freedom, we're at AEI. It's the freedom to buy and sell and compete anywhere in the world with as little government interference as possible. That's what trade is all about. I think it's the greatest economic freedom we have as a country. And by the way, it's the most anti-Washington, because it addresses the question, who has the power? Who has the power to decide what you can buy and at what price? Is it Washington? Is it a bunch of special interests? Or is it you, the consumer? Free trade says that power resides with you, the consumer. And when we do that through our free trade agreements, we've been incredibly successful. And so I'm anxious and eager to work with President Trump and the trade team. We are already in NAFTA and encouraging them to move aggressively in the Asia-Pacific area. Trade, a welfare reform. Frankly, we need more workers and qualified workers. We think a lot of them, Alex, are trapped in the welfare system. We think they have incredible potential. So welfare reform and getting people a glide path, an open path to a better paying job is critical as well. And then healthcare, we still have a lot of work to do in the healthcare space as well. So we're excited about having a clear path in that area.
Sounds like a full-time job.
It is. It's the best job in America, frankly.
Kevin Brady, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us. We're all very appreciative of your remarks, and we wish you the best of luck as you work through this process.
Thanks, Alex.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you.